Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here, and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video, we have my Game Week 35 deadline decisions. This is a weekly series where I take you through your final questions and dilemmas ahead of the upcoming deadline, and also review the key information from the press conferences as well. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, as always, I thought I'd start the video with the key press conference updates as of Friday afternoon for Game Week 35. I'll then go through some of your key questions ahead of the upcoming deadline. I'm then going to present a wildcard draft to you of the updated information that we currently have. And then at the end of the video, I have my own team selection and my updated transfer plans. And I am not currently on wildcard. I've already used my wildcard in Game Week 30. So hopefully this video will have something for everyone. Hopefully you stick with me throughout the video, but if you are in a specific rush and this video is too long for you, there will be timestamps down below as per every video that I ever upload so that you can skip to the section that best suits you. So, starting with the key press conference updates, we'll start with Chelsea and Spurs because they're the two teams that double this week, and then we'll move on to some of the teams that obviously only have one fixture. So on Chelsea, the good news is that Cole Palmer is back in training and is available. I suppose I say good news. Everyone's going to have Palmer, and most people are probably going to captain Palmer, so I don't think he's really that great of an option, given that we're not going to gain much from him. There is the option to go against him, but I also don't think that that's particularly wise. I would love to know, most people are probably going to own Palmer, but are you going to captain him? Is there some consideration for Son? Or another option, like maybe a cheeky punt like a Brennan Johnson? Or are you just thinking maybe a single game week option such as Isak, Gordon, Bruno could be a potential option? I don't mind that. Even you could potentially go for something like a De Bruyne or a Foden. These are all decent options. I probably will end up on Palmer or Son just because I'm a sucker for a double game week. And we saw in Game Week 34 how well doubles can go. But I would love to know down below who are you captaining. But anyway, Palmer is available, which is good news, I suppose. Gusto and Chilwell are injured. And the big one being Gusto here. I'm really struggling to find a definitive update on Gusto. I don't know what the injury is. I don't know how long he's out for. I'm really struggling here. But there was someone that posted on social media, they bumped into Gusto, and he's in his own personal training at the moment. He did appear to be out on the grass in the picture. So trying to piece a few things together, I don't think Gusto's injury is particularly severe, and I don't think it's particularly long-term. And therefore, it could be that come Game Week 37, the second double, that you might actually have Gusto available, but it doesn't look like he's going to feature at all in Game Week 35. So if you're looking to maybe move to a Nicholas Jackson, but you're already on like triple Chelsea. So for me, I've got like Petrovic, Gusto, and Palmer. Well, you could sell Gusto, sell one of your forwards, and switch that third Chelsea spot to Jackson. Or maybe you're just looking at trying to field the best defenders you can. Gusto to a Newcastle defender could work very well. For me, I've got so many other issues. I obviously can't rely on Gusto this week now, but I might just tuck him on my bench and just hope that come Game Week 35, he's available. Oh, sorry, come Game Week 37, that he's available. But for 35... we're not going to get Gusto by the looks of it. Sterling is also a doubt. Not that many people are probably going to go there. And then there are some interesting updates about Nkunku and Reece James being the main ones, but also Colwill and Sanchez are back in partial team training as well. The reason Nkunku and James being back in partial team training is interesting. If Nkunku can stay fit, does Jackson start every remaining game this season? Maybe, maybe not. They could play together, of course, but Jackson's played a lot of minutes. He's not finishing all of his chances. Could Nkunku get a game as the number 9? Absolutely. But Reece James in particular, if he can stay fit, which is like the big if, of course, because he doesn't tend to, is Gusto even going to start both in 37 if he's fit? Because let's say Gusto doesn't feature in 35, but in 36 he gets minutes off the bench and he's fully fit and available for Game Week 37. What if James is also available? And that's my concern here. So I think on wildcard, you definitely don't have Gusto now. And I think if you've got the free transfer to use, I'd be happy selling Gusto. I think the only time where you don't sell Gusto now is if you have loads of other issues to sort in your team. I don't know that it's worth taking a hit this week to replace Gusto. So for me, I'm probably going to tuck him on the bench. I'd love to know down below what your plan is with him if you own him. Moving on to Spurs, the two key updates is that Porro and Richarlison have trained well and are available. So Pedro Porro, if you want to select him on your wildcard, or if you're looking to bring him in, he should be fine. I'm looking at maybe bringing him in myself. And Richarlison has trained well and it is available too. The reason I think that's important is lots of people looking at a cheeky punt on Brennan Johnson. And whilst I still think, regardless of who's available, Brennan Johnson's probably first choice at the moment, you just never know with now everyone back and fit and available in that sort of front three for Spurs. You could have sort of Kulusevski, Son, and Werner. You could have Werner, Son, and Richarlison as part of the front three. Like, there are loads of different combinations that they can play. And therefore, whilst I do think Brennan Johnson is first choice, this might put me off slightly because most Spurs fans seem to think Richarlison's going to go straight back into the number 9. and it might be Sonny off the left. You could then still see Johnson on the right, which is probably most likely at the moment, but then you've got lots of other options that can play there too. So it might put me off slightly. Richarlison could even be a cheeky punt himself, but we don't know how secure his minutes will be. Udogie has been confirmed out for the season. I own Udogie, which is really painful. Ahead of this really nice double-double and ahead of Burnley and Sheffield United at the end of the season, it looks like I'm now going to have to remove Udogie, which isn't ideal. So those are the updates on the teams that double. Moving on, Newcastle. Pope, Trippier, Joelinton and Almiron are making progress, according to Eddie Howe, as much as you want to believe him, but they will miss Game Week 35. So Trippier's not an option for this week. Probably not going to be an option for 36, you'd imagine, either, but maybe coming into that double, if you've got a free Newcastle spot, and maybe you want to leave one open, Kieran Trippier could be the ultimate differential. Nick Pope is an interesting one, because it probably means you can't go for Dubravka now, unless you already own him. But could you go for Nick Pope on Wildcard? I don't mind this idea, right? Because you probably don't need Nick Pope this week if you're going for something like a Petrovic or a Vicario instead, or even an Onana. Lots of other keepers have good fixtures this week. Most of those keepers you could probably get away with playing in 36. So really all you need Pope for is the double and then maybe 38. In a few weeks, could Pope be available? Maybe. I probably wouldn't risk it because Newcastle spots are so valuable that I'd probably want some other players instead, but you definitely could think about it. Livramento will be assessed after training after picking up a knock, so Livramento may or may not be available. But I still think Fabian Schär and Dan Burn are the two safest defenders. On Manchester City, the one key update is obviously around Erling Haaland that everyone wants, and sadly we didn't actually get anything from Pep on Friday, at least on Friday afternoon, but we do have a quote from him on Thursday evening, and what he said was, "I prefer to have Erling Haaland at my disposal than to be without him." That's an obvious point. He says he feels better, but I don't know for Sunday. This is fairly upbeat and positive, right? Saying that he feels better. He doesn't know for Sunday, hasn't been fully ruled out. But we did see this for quite large spells when he was injured previously, where Pep kept saying, yeah, he's back in training and he's feeling good and we don't know, but he just kept being injured. So I wouldn't be surprised if Haaland's out for the season. I also wouldn't be surprised if he does play in Game Week 35. My prediction, though, my honest prediction is probably he doesn't play in 35, but he will be back for 36. But that is just a random prediction. I've not really got much to back that up. There is a good chance we get embargoed quotes later today. And if you are new to press conferences in FPL, embargoed quotes are quotes that are released later in the day, around sort of 10:30, 11 p.m. ahead of tomorrow for sort of journalists and media. So around, I think it's about 10:30, 11 p.m. UK time, we might get some embargoed quotes from Pep Guardiola, which is extra information that isn't currently available to us. So do check sort of my socials, I guess, on Friday evening, or maybe just check socials in general. Also tune into the deadline stream. There is a chance that we get a more definitive update around Haaland, but as of right now, he's obviously a serious doubt going into Game Week 35. I probably wouldn't look to sell him anyway, unless we get an update that he's definitely out, and maybe even out for 36 and 37. I just don't see who you're going for instead. I would struggle to pick three strikers at the moment to go for, three forwards in FPL, because Isak feels great. Jackson's okay, I suppose. You could go for a João Pedro or a Højlund, but would I want to select three of those? Not really, no. I wouldn't even want to select two. I think most people would just be happy having Haaland and Isak. So the only other player that I can think you'd go for is maybe like a Julian Alvarez, but I would hold on to Haaland unless we get a really negative definitive update as of sort of Friday evening going into Saturday. But for now, sadly, we don't have anything completely conclusive on whether he's going to play or not. Really surprising update was actually around Eberechi Eze. So, and this is quite unfortunate, I think, for people that aren't wildcarding and didn't free hit. Those that brought in Eze, he's actually a doubt for Game Week 35 with a knee injury, and no decision has been made on his availability yet. Didn't sound overly positive, the update from Glasner, but you just never know, I suppose. So maybe hold on to him. But I did see a few people were like, my plan was to get Eze for 34 and then sell Eze to Gordon. But now they weren't sure because obviously, Eze looked fantastic in Game Week 34. He's on penalties. Like, do you want to sell Eze? This would maybe make the decision a little bit easier because I think for the remainder of the season, Gordon is a better asset than Eze. He's a better asset for Game Week 35. And if you chuck into that also the fact that Eze's a doubt, Eze to Gordon now feels a lot more comfortable for me. But maybe you want to wait and see if we get a further update before the deadline. But yeah, a little bit unfortunate for those that were looking to hold on to Eze for the remainder of the season. On Liverpool, Diogo Jota and Bradley are still out injured. So for those that brought in Jota again and aren't a wild card, you probably need to remove him. Bradley doesn't look like he'll feature anytime soon. And Trent's playing so well anyway. You'd expect him to start most games. And then Gakpo is also in contention for Game Week 35 after the birth of his child. If you are unaware, by the way, because some people that only watch the YouTube and they're not active on social media, Luis Diaz was not supposed to start the second game of Game Week 34. So Luis Diaz was on the bench. And because Gakpo's wife gave birth, he then obviously had to be there or wanted to be there. So he then came out of the starting 11, out of the squad, and Luis Diaz came in. So in Game Week 35, if Gakpo's now in contention, he didn't even play midweek. I think Gakpo starts. So there is a good chance one of Darwin or Diaz doesn't start, or maybe Salah, I suppose. But could even be a couple of them. It could be that they go for like a front three of, I don't know, Elliot, Darwin, Gakpo or something like that, and Diaz and Salah miss out. I don't know, but it would just put me off. And unless it's Salah, who I still think should start, Diaz and Darwin might be okay sells now because Liverpool aren't playing well. There are some really nice options with better fixtures, and Gakpo has been one of Liverpool's best attackers in recent weeks, and you'd probably expect him to start. So a few updates there on Liverpool. On Manchester United, Marcus Rashford looks set to miss out again. The quote from Ten Hag was basically that the squad's not going to change at all from the midweek game. So Marcus Rashford looks to miss out again. The defenders that are all out at the moment, none of those look like they'll be available as well. So Harry Maguire, Dalot are absolutely nailed on because there are only so many defenders Manchester United have to choose from as well. The reason that I bring up Marcus Rashford is Garnacho. I don't think Garnacho's likely to be benched at any point, but I think if Rashford and Antony are both fit and available, there could just be one game because Garnacho has played a lot of minutes and Ten Hag has commented that he's looked fatigued at points. There could have been a game where Antony starts on the right, Rashford on the left, and Højlund through the middle. With Rashford out, I think Garnacho is going to play more minutes. Like, even coming off the bench, there aren't many decent players that can even replace Garnacho. So I think this is good if you own or are looking to own Garnacho. I think his minutes should be even more secure than they previously were. And then just finally, a lot of people are asking about Neto, the goalkeeper, because they obviously have him, maybe looking to keep him for the remainder of the season. But he was benched in the second game of Game Week 34. The quote coming out from Iraola on Neto is, sometimes I decide the morning of the game. I wait until I've seen them in training, and those last feelings I have. Neto has been very good. He has played very well, but I want to see Mark Travers, that is, as in training, he's been a very good goalkeeper. So no update there, sadly. Could be Travers, could be Neto. If I had a free transfer, or maybe I just wanted to bring in a doubling keeper for 37 anyway, this might be a good point to potentially take Neto out. Because yes, he could play, and yes, he could keep a clean sheet. But if he doesn't, you're then going to feel like, well, I've missed 1 week. And then you're going to be like, oh, but does he maybe start in 36? I would just probably look to get rid. I think it's a decent time to, unless you've got a decent second keeper and you're not looking to bench boost. But I think anyone, Onana could be a decent option. Petrovic, I still think should be starting most of the games. There are enough decent options to think that you could move to potentially. Even a single game week keeper like Jordan Pickford could be a decent shout. So those are, I think, most of the key press conference updates. Again, if there's anything that comes out later this evening that's been embargoed, I'll cover it on tomorrow's deadline stream. Let's now move on to answering some of your questions ahead of Game Week 35. So understandably so, lots of people discussing Spurs and Chelsea assets this week because they are the only two teams with 2 remaining doubles. They're the only 2 teams that double this week. And across the season, they have both had some pretty good FPL assets to choose from. But also, outside of Son and Palmer, you look at them now and just think there aren't that many options. It does feel a bit uninspiring, even if you're on a wildcard, choosing more than 3 or 4 assets from Spurs and Chelsea. So some of the questions I've had is, I only have Son and Palmer as doublers this week. Do I need to add more? Especially if you're prioritising them ahead of some of the other players that have good fixtures. And do we need to load up on Chelsea and Spurs this week? So the straight short answer, if you just want the quick and then you can move on, is no, you don't need to load up on Chelsea and Spurs, and you don't need more than Son and Palmer, because it's not just about doubles. And I say this as someone that goes absolutely mental for doubles, right? I love them. I'll always try and get as many doublers as possible. But just having extra fixtures doesn't turn a bad asset into a good asset. And just having extra fixtures doesn't turn an asset that isn't as good as another one suddenly into a better one than them, right? So I guess what I'm saying is, if you've got 2 options and one of them is just a drastically better option, don't choose the weaker one just because they've got 2 fixtures. That feels like an obvious thing to say, but I think sometimes, I don't think doubles are a trap, by the way, but sometimes we can get a little bit, we can almost overemphasize how important they are and how good they are. So absolutely, you do not need to go and load up on Chelsea and Spurs. But in some of these positions, I'm like, who are you going for instead, right? So let's look at Jackson as an example for this. So with Jackson, he's the only player that you'll get 6 fixtures from as a forward, unless you choose a Timo Werner, but he's probably not going to start all of them. And I know Jackson might not start all of them, and I know his finishing is not perfect, but you immediately get 12 appearance points if he starts all of them, right? And he doesn't get booked or anything like that, right? So you get those appearance points, and could you get a few attacking returns? Are you probably expecting at least a few attacking returns? Absolutely. And fixtures-wise, no, they're not perfect. He's got 3 at home, 3 away. He does play against some decent defences. Villa are pretty good defensively. Brighton aren't bad defensively. Bournemouth aren't bad as well. But these are also some defences that can be got at. Villa have been susceptible to conceding goals. Spurs are not a particularly great defence, and they've got injuries. West Ham can absolutely be got at. We've seen that again and again this season. So, again, they're not perfect fixtures, but you're getting quite a few. And when I look at the alternatives, as I said, who are you going for? Højlund? maybe. Fixtures are probably slightly better than Chelsea's, but you get one less. Also, Højlund's underlying data is so poor that he just doesn't get enough chances. I know Jackson gets the chances and doesn't convert them, but Højlund just doesn't get them. I know he scored obviously against Sheffield United, but in general, I think before that game, he'd taken like one shot on target in 4 games or something ridiculous. So I don't love that particularly. João Pedro, his minutes aren't secure, and even himself, he does miss chances. And Brighton's fixtures aren't any stronger than Chelsea's. Isak's obviously a given, and you might have Haaland as well. But I mean, like, I just don't know who you're going for in that spot instead. So I think people will just say, "We'll go for Ollie Watkins or go for Mateta," and maybe you're right there. But you're getting 2 less fixtures, and both Crystal Palace and Villa, I don't particularly like those fixtures. Not only do they have 2 less, I would argue that their fixtures aren't much, if at all, stronger than Chelsea's. So in like Jackson's position, it's not that we love Jackson. We think someone said you're expecting Jackson to turn into prime Messi. No one said that at any point. It's like, he's a pretty good option. There aren't many viable alternatives. But when you look at someone like Maddison instead, Maddison versus Gordon, let me actually just pull up Newcastle's fixtures. So Maddison's got Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Burnley, City, Sheffield United. Maddison's minutes haven't been perfect. He's had quite a few early subs. And in the next 4, out of the next 5 fixtures, he's got Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, City, right? So Maddison's fixtures are not great, but he does have an extra 1. But if you look to like a Gordon instead, Gordon's got Sheffield United, Burnley, Brighton, Man United, Brentford. All 5 of those are excellent fixtures. Maybe Brighton the most difficult in there, but it's at home. I know Gordon's not great away from home if 3 of the next 5 are away, so you do need to consider that. But I would just rather, for 1 less game, have Gordon than Maddison. I don't even think that's a comparison. I just think Gordon is so much better than Maddison across the remainder of the season. I'm not saying he'll definitely outscore him, but I would just much rather have him. So in that case, no, I wouldn't load up on Spurs. And also Pedro Porro. Let's say Pedro Porro versus Fabian Schär. You've got exactly the same issue, but it's maybe even worse with Pedro Porro. Because can you see a clean sheet against Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, or City? I can't in any of those games. Even Burnley have actually been attacking slightly better this season. So we're not expecting a clean sheet, maybe 1 for the remainder of the season for Spurs. Whereas with Newcastle, you've got, again, Sheffield United, Burnley, maybe not a clean sheet. Brighton have been attacking quite poorly. United are terrible. And Brentford. I see maybe 2, maybe 3 clean sheets there for Newcastle. So, I don't know. I guess for me, what I'm saying here is I don't think you should view it as, do you load up on Chelsea? Do you load up on Spurs? Should you have 3 of each? It's more just look at each option in isolation. Son and Palmer, absolutely locked in, brilliant options for both of them. Then it goes down to, do you prefer Jackson or Højlund? I'd prefer Jackson. Do I prefer Maddison or Gordon? I prefer Gordon. Do I prefer Porro or Schär? I would prefer Schär, but I also do think Pedro Porro is a fine option. I think we'll look at my wildcard a bit later, if I was to be on a wildcard, that is, what I would go with. I would still probably have 3 from Chelsea, because I like their fixtures slightly more than Spurs, and I think I like Petrovic more than Vicario. So I think I'd have like a Petrovic, Jackson, Palmer. But with Spurs, I wouldn't have any more than 2. I'd have Porro and I'd have Son, and I'd leave it there because, yes, Johnson's fine. Yes, Maddison's fine. Lots of people keep asking me about Brennan Johnson. Love him as an option. Great. I don't know how secure his minutes are, but he's very, very good. But I would just rather Anthony Gordon. I'd rather Bruno Fernandes. I'd rather all of these other options that have 1 less fixture. So, I mean, I've not really answered here in general. I guess I would just say change the way that you're viewing this, rather than just saying, do you need more doublers? Just view each one. Would you prefer Gordon? Would you prefer Maddison? And I think that will make it a little bit easier for you. So this is maybe a question slightly more relevant to non-wildcarders, but maybe also worth discussing for those that are on wildcard. One last dance with Salah. Is it worth it? We probably, there are rumours going around that this is Salah's final season with Liverpool. This may well be our final chance to own Salah. Do we stick with him? And I think the issue that we've got for a lot of people is it's not going to be for free, because there are other issues like Udogie, like Bradley, like getting in doublers for single game players that we currently have. Those that don't have a wildcard, you're probably not in a privileged enough position to just be able to do Salah to Gordon for free. If you are, it feels relatively easy to sell Salah at the moment because he has been super disappointing. But the data's not been bad for him. Let me actually pull up the data just to have a bit of a discussion around it. So, across the last few games, he obviously didn't start against Fulham, so we'll ignore that. But against Everton, really disappointing performance from him. But he still put up 0.82 XGI. Really good data. Then against Crystal Palace, 0.67 XGI. Really good data. Against Man United, 1.35. Even if you remove the penalty, it's then still over 0.5 XGI. Against Brighton, again, remove the penalty, it's still over 0.7 XGI. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that Salah is still getting a high quantity of chances. Maybe not like the very peak Salah that we would get from the past. He's still getting enough chances to return every single game. The issue comes that he is not playing well. And this is when you need to kind of bin data off and just say, you look at Salah, you watch the games, he doesn't even look remotely close to getting a goal. It's not like he's hitting the crossbar every game and he's getting really unlucky. He's not like every shot seems to clear the bar by about 20 feet. He's just playing really badly. The other issue that Salah's got is that he's playing with Darwin, who is also playing really badly. So I think if Darwin was playing really well and finishing his chances, if Darwin was an Erling Haaland, maybe not Erling Haaland right now, or a Harry Kane, Salah would have like 5 assists in the last 3 games. The amount of times that he slides Darwin in, or that he gives a pass to Darwin, and Darwin fluffs it. So Salah's passing to the wrong people to get the assists. So again, this is where like you need to balance between he's still getting chances. Do you show patience with him and just say he's still getting the chances? I value him as an asset. We know how good he's been in the past. He will eventually finish those. Or do you look at it and just say, ignore the data, Ross? Like he's not playing well. And it's as simple as that sometimes. Watch the game. You'll see he's absolutely stinking it up. Get rid of him. I think it's probably somewhere in the middle, right? I don't think you should overrely and just say the data's good. He's been good in the past. I'll keep him indefinitely. But I also don't think you should just bin him off because he's been missing his chances recently. I think there is a fine balance between the two. So I'm sort of on the fence at the moment. Is it worth selling Salah for Gordon or Bruno? Yes, for free, I would probably do it. If I had no other issues in my team and I had a free transfer, I would rather both Gordon and Bruno to Salah. So I would do it for free, yes. When it comes to taking a -4, I'm less keen. Because with Salah, he is still Salah, right? Regardless of how bad he's playing, he still, as he's showing here, he still will get chances. And he can be playing the worst you've ever seen him play. That doesn't mean that you won't get one of those that converts into a goal or an assist. Even if he's playing badly, he can still finish one chance. He's also on penalties. And I kind of feel like there might be a little bit less pressure on Liverpool now that people have basically counted them out of the title race. I also don't think West Ham have been attacking particularly well either. Sorry, defending particularly well either. So I don't hate the idea of holding Salah this week. And so I think for a -4, if Salah gets one return, I'm saying one return, assist, goal, something, you basically need Gordon, KDB, Bruno, whoever you're bringing in for Salah to outscore Salah. And they probably need 2 attacking returns. And I don't like that. I don't like the idea as much for taking a hit to sell Salah. So I think I'm going to go against the crowd here who seem to think you just get rid of Salah at all costs. And I would say if it's for a hit, I would probably hold on to Salah. But I would love to know down below what you think about selling Salah for a hit this week. When it comes down to who I'd select out of Gordon, KDB, Foden and Bruno, I'm not saying that just completely ignore data and just go for vibes completely. But in the final 4 game weeks, it does depend on so many things, right? It depends on what who you're trying to chase. Are you trying to make up 40 points, 80 points? Are you in the lead? Are you defending? Who do your mini league leaders have? What rank are you trying to achieve? All of these different things. But also, like, the smaller the sample, right? Let's say I'm trying to predict what will happen over 8 game weeks. I would trust data a lot more than I would my vibes. But in a single week, we kind of saw this in game week 34. The data suggested that Mateta was the worst forward to pick from. His data was really bad. But he went and delivered a 29-pointer. Across the entire season, I would back that the guys with the best data tend to do better than the guys with the worst data. So with a 4-game-week spell, these are all good options, right? Foden, Bruno, KDB, Gordon, they are all fantastic. They've all got some decent fixtures. They've all got a double game week. Just trust yourself. I think if I was to only have one of these for the remainder of the season, let's say I couldn't bring in any of the others, it probably would be Foden or Bruno for me because they've got good underlying data. They've got good fixtures. They seem relatively nailed as well. With Foden, he's got much better goal threat than KDB, so I think he's worth it. Even if they were the same price, I'd prefer Foden to KDB. And what you get with Bruno is you get safety of minutes, you get penalties, and I actually think the Man United's fixtures are arguably the best on this list, maybe outside of Newcastle, but I prefer Man United's fixtures to City's. So I think maybe if I was to only have one, it might genuinely be Bruno or Foden. I don't think KDB's bad, but he would probably be last on this list just for me. This is honestly just my opinion. I love Gordon, but the concern with Gordon is out of the remaining 5 games they've got, 2 of them are at home and 3 of them are away. I've just looked again into Gordon's data. He's sat above a 0.6 XGI at home this season and just below 0.3 XGI away. His data is literally half that away from home as it is at home. So basically, you are probably expecting double the output at home versus away. And we've seen that this season. I think he's only blanked on one, maybe two occasions this season at home, whereas it's the complete alternative away. I think he's only returned on two occasions. So Gordon away from home is just not good. And I think we've seen this over a large enough sample to say that it must be the way that Newcastle set up at home versus the way they set up away. And whilst two of those away games are like Manchester United and Burnley, I think, are two of the away ones, and they are really bad defences, he's also played against other bad defences away from home this season, and he's not done particularly well. So that would be my only slight concern with Gordon. But in all honesty, on a wildcard, I would have Gordon, Foden, and Bruno. But if I'm to rank them for the remainder of the season, I'm going to say Bruno, Foden, Gordon. If you can prioritise, let's say you're going to bring in two of them, priority this week would be Gordon, right? Due to the fixture. It's about the entry point for when you bring them in. Gordon's slightly better this week. Then maybe for 37, I'd maybe slightly prefer Bruno to these options. I like the entry point of game week 36 for Foden. So maybe work out, if you're going to bring all of them in which order do you do it? But if you're only going to go for one, it's difficult to overlook Bruno just due to penalties, safety of minutes, fixtures. And he's also in a really nice run of form. His underlying data is good. He's passing the eye test. He's getting the chance to score goals. So, yeah, I really just think you should trust your feeling here. If you've just got this niggling feeling deep inside, you're just like, I really think KDB is going to do very well for the remainder of the season. Please go and do that, because I can't predict the future. And especially over such a short period of time as 4 game weeks, anything can happen. So I'd love to know down below, if you're in a position like me and you've got no wildcard and you've got Salah in your team, are you going to sell him? If so, is it for free or is it for a -4? And who are you looking to bring in? If I was going to sell Salah for a -4 this week, after just saying that I prefer the other two options, it would be for Gordon, just because I think that he has the highest upside against Sheffield United at home. So lots of non-wildcarders this week, also looking at maybe taking some pretty big hits. I've seen -8s, -12s discussed over on Twitter. And I guess the purpose here is almost to play like a mini wildcard. Obviously, we don't have our wildcards at the moment, unless you do, which is great. Then you're going to have to take hits if you want to make various transfers. But before a sort of a final 4 game week stretch, before 2 double game weeks, before certain teams go on really nice fixture runs, is it worth just doing like a -8 or a -12 now and just setting your team up for the remainder of the season? Because what you could do instead is make one this week, make one next week, maybe take a -4 in 37, maybe take a -4 in 38. Or you could just say, I'm just going to front load those hits, right? So rather than sort of spread those hits out, I'm going to front load them, get my team set up really well for game week 35 and beyond. Yes, it might cost me 12, but I'm getting all the players that I want. And then I've got more luxury transfers to use over the next few weeks. I love this idea, right? I really like the idea of a mini wildcard sometimes, not taking hits for the sake of it. But if you want to bring in Gordon, you want to bring in Shea, you want to bring in Pedro Porro, you maybe want to take a punt on Brennan Johnson, but that's going to cost you 12 points to do. But you think that would genuinely really strengthen your team over the remainder of the season. It could be made up in 1 week. We saw earlier in the season, you remember I took a -12 and then a -4, and I got a green arrow in both. Or it was a -8 and -4. Was it a -8 or a -12? I can't even remember. I took a big hit and I got a green arrow in the week that I took a hit. I took a -20 3 seasons ago, and it paid off pretty much immediately as well. So big hits aren't inherently bad. So is it worth, I suppose, because I'm sort of weighing this up myself, taking a big boy hit this week to just set my team up in a way where it almost looks like a wild card and just to really attack the final 4 game weeks? So I've just put a few things that I'm thinking about when I'm looking at, is it worth taking a big hit? The first thing is you do have transfers after game week 35. This is an obvious point, but what I wouldn't want to do is, let's say, take a -12 this week, set my team up perfectly, and then be like, well, I actually don't need those transfers, particularly in 36, 37, 38. Again, there are things you can, of course, do, and you'd have the luxury of choosing potential upgrades to make there. But then I would be thinking to myself, did I need to make them all in 35? If I've got sort of spare transfers now in 36 and 37, could I have just spread them out a little bit more? So whilst I said there is value in front loading, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the best way to do it. The other thing to note is optimal doesn't always win. The reason you take a -12 is because you're looking at it and thinking, like for me, I've got to play Van Heck against Bournemouth away this week. Do I just take another -4 and get in like Fabian Schär and Dan Burn and play both of them, which allows me to bench Van Heck? Do I bring in Gordon for Salah for a -4? Because on paper, Gordon is better than Salah this week. We've seen every single week this season, when you have a good team going into the game week, you often get a red arrow. And when you have a really bad team, or one that you feel isn't particularly good for the week, that can often result in a green arrow. So it's incredibly important to understand that optimal on paper doesn't always win. So you might look at your team versus a wildcarders team and go, this is a disaster. Their team's so much better. You could just get slightly lucky with some of your players that don't look perfect on paper. For me, it would be a Van Heck against Bournemouth away. Van Heck randomly scores a header and they somehow keep a clean sheet and I get 15 points. I'm not saying that you should rely on getting lucky, but don't go out there and take a hit every single week to try and build the perfect team on paper, because the perfect team doesn't always do the best. So that may be sometimes when I think about it, I'm like, yeah, do you know what? No, I would rather not have a couple of these players. I'd rather Gordon than Salah. But could you see a world in which Salah outscores Gordon? You absolutely could. I don't think it will happen, but it's certainly plausible. The next thing is about entry points. And I speak about entry points a lot. What I mean by an entry point is, which is the best week on paper in isolation to bring in that asset? For Gordon, it's this week. His best fixture for the remainder of the season is Game Week 35. If you are going to take a hit to bring in Gordon, or even just transfer Gordon at any point, it is this week. Phil Foden, on the other hand, I would argue maybe Game Week 36 against Wolves at home, that might be the best entry point. I would say that for Bruno Fernandes, great fixture this week, but maybe even the best entry point is for 37. So I think it really depends on the player that you're bringing in. For example, Nico Jackson. I wouldn't really want Nico Jackson to come in 37. If I was going to bring him in, it would be to get him for the double-double. So think about what is the best entry point just for that specific player you're looking to bring in. And if it is this week, then I'd be more inclined to take a hit than if you think that their best entry point is like Game Week 37. And then the final thing is try to view each hit in isolation unless they are a combination of transfers. So if you're like, this wouldn't work now, but let's say hypothetically you're selling Salah to buy Haaland, well then those transfers need to be considered together because you're trying to free up funds to buy Haaland. But assuming that each move is possible in isolation, I don't like viewing it as a minus 12. I would say, is Udogie to Porro worth it for free? Yes. Next question. Is Bradley to Fabian Schär worth it for a minus 4? Maybe. Next question. Is Salah to Gordon worth it for a minus 4? Done. Is João Pedro to Jackson worth it for a minus? Do you know what I mean? I don't say, is this minus 12 worth it, unless the transfers are in combination, because each hit is its own hit. So I think that sometimes helps. That's when you can start loading up and think, actually, this minus 12 looks good on paper, because every single hit I actually like quite a lot. So I guess I've not really, to be honest, I never do this, but I've never answered like your specific question, like you should take a hit here. But hopefully me talking through these things allows you to come to your own decision. I mean, that is the purpose of my YouTube channel, is for me to give you my thought process, the way that I make decisions, and hopefully that will help you too. I'd love to know down below, again, if you're not wildcarding this week, what kind of hit are you looking at? We'll discuss my team at the end of the video. I'm probably looking most likely at a minus 4, but I have considered a minus 8. I don't think my team needs a minus 12 this week. So I released a wildcard video earlier in the week, but a lot of people just said, can you just give us an updated version based on what we currently know and any new information? So I have changed this a little bit, but large parts of it are the same. So what is the same is that front 8. And you will see it's very, very popular and it's very template on wildcard. But I need to keep reiterating to you, not many people have their wildcard left, and not many people will be able to get this front 8 if they don't have this wildcard. And even those that have this wildcard won't necessarily have this exact front 8. So whilst it feels template, I promise you that the combination of having these 8 players and starting 7 of them every week is a differential in and of itself. So don't feel like you can't pick these 8 players just because you see other content creators doing it. They are, in my opinion, probably the best 8. I would say the only spots, oh, by the way, if you're listening to this rather than watching, I'll quickly read it out. Fernandes, Foden, Palmer, Gordon, Son, Jackson, Haaland, Isak. So that is the 8 that a lot of people will select. I would say the only parts where I would be happy differing, I like the idea of Brennan Johnson as a punt, I really do, but it would genuinely only be probably for Anthony Gordon or Fernandes, and I don't prefer him to either of those. I don't like the idea of Maddison, unless he just suddenly turns up out of nowhere. Even Spurs fans are saying just don't bother picking him. He's just not been the same since coming back from injury. So Brennan Johnson could come in. Outside that, I think KDB is a genuine option, but it would be instead of Fernandes or Foden. And as I discussed previously, I just think Foden and Fernandes are slightly better options. In attack, you could go for a Højlund. You could go for an Alvarez if we think that Haaland's going to miss out. You could go for a João Pedro, is a cheap option. I just don't think he's better than Jackson, particularly. So I would go for this front 8. When it goes to the defence and the goalkeepers, I think this is completely interchangeable. I think one thing you need is at least one Newcastle defender. Some people are having Brennan Johnson instead of Gordon, and then that allows them to have another Newcastle defender. I don't mind that, but I just think Gordon's too good. I would want Gordon for Sheffield United at home. So for me, it's Isak, Gordon, Schär. So Fabian Schär has been in pretty much all of the wildcard drafts that I've built. I would have Pedro Porro now that he's been cleared as fit and available, because I just think he's a better asset than Vicario. Vicario doesn't actually make that many saves. Pedro Porro has some attacking threat. You could conceivably go without any Spurs defenders, and I don't necessarily dislike that. But I would probably have Pedro Porro in there because there just aren't many good defenders to choose from. So Pedro Porro's in, Vicario's out based on my recent draft that I showed. And I've actually gone for a different Man United and Brighton combo. Again, given that they both double in 37, I'd probably have one of each. I wouldn't want two of either of these teams. I think before I had Onana and Van Heck. I've actually just switched that to Verbruggen and Dalot. You could even go Verbruggen and Maguire, but you could equally just go back to a Van Heck, a Dunk, and then an Onana. I don't really mind which combination you go for. There is a slight risk with Verbruggen that he doesn't start every game and that still comes in for one. And you could say that Dalot's probably not worth the extra million on top of Maguire. I just really like Dalot as a Man United fan. When I watch us, he always looks likely to get involved in the attacking returns. Doesn't always plan out that way, but I just think Dalot's a really decent option. He's also very, very, very good for baseline bonus. So for me, I think Dalot and Verbruggen is also a differential option, but also a nice combination. But like I said, Onana and Van Heck is okay. I have got Petrovic because, again, it just feels like there's no other great goalkeepers to choose from. I mean, you could risk it with the Newcastle one. You could go for Ederson because I only actually got two Man City options here. You could go for Wright. I don't like any of them options, really. So I've just gone for Petrovic due to there not being many good goalkeepers to choose from. And also, you do get 2 extra fixtures with Petrovic, assuming that he does keep his place. And then I've just finished the draft off with Gabriel and Ben White. Because, honestly, who are you choosing in the defence otherwise? There are no good defenders to choose from. And Arsenal are just that good defensively. So I've got Gabriel and Ben White in here, but no, they don't have any extra fixtures. The fixtures that they've got aren't particularly perfect, but they do have 2 remaining home games in 36 and 38 that you'd be happy playing them in. And also, if you had to bench boost with double Arsenal defence against Man United, especially with the attacking threat that Gabriel and White have, it could actually be okay. So this is the wildcard updated draft. You might want to try and squeeze in an extra Man City player, whether that be Gvardiol, Ederson, De Bruyne. You might want to change the defence slightly, but I mean, I think a lot of the picks kind of pick themselves, and just because it looks template on paper, that isn't a bad thing, because as I said, not that many people actually have their wildcard available this week. So guys, I thought I would just end the video by discussing my updated transfer plans and maybe just take you through for the remainder of the season how I'm sort of aiming to get. Let's actually switch this to a predicted one game. We can find it a little bit easier. So, at the moment, Palmer looks like he's been cleared as fit and available, so the flag on him doesn't matter. Haaland, I think I'll keep regardless. If he doesn't play, I've got João Pedro. Hopefully, João Pedro starts. That's not a given, but if he doesn't, hopefully get something off the bench, I suppose. So I'd probably just have João Pedro come in for Haaland. Let's say we don't expect Haaland to start. And so if Gusto's not available, Udogie's not available, and Bradley's not available, I need to make at least one defender transfer. And I'm kind of thinking about making 2. And the reason that I'm thinking about making 2, because I don't usually love taking hits for defenders, is firstly, I don't love the idea of playing Van Heck this week. But also, if anyone misses out in any of the spots, I have no bench if Haaland doesn't feature. So it kind of feels like it's probably worth making 2 transfers this week, despite it being for a -4 hit. So what I'm currently thinking about, I'd probably keep Gusto just in case he's available for 37. Whereas Udogie's out for the season and Bradley just is out for an indefinite period, and we also don't think he'll start regardless. So it feels like maybe it makes more sense to sell Udogie and Bradley. So I think the first move I'd want to do is Udogie to Fabian Schär. For me, that makes the most sense as a transfer. I prefer Schär to Porro. So Schär would come in. Then that second transfer, I probably actually maybe prefer Dan Burn to Porro. But the issue is if I go for double Newcastle defence, it does block me from getting Anthony Gordon. But the way that I'm viewing this is Son, Palmer, Garnacho, Foden, I'm not going to sell unless they have issues. So I've only got that Salah spot to sell. In that Salah spot, I can just go for KDB or Bruno Fernandes if I don't go for Gordon. Because I think the only real fixture that I'd be desperately like, oh, I need Gordon is this week. And I don't think I'm going to make that. Sorry, I don't think I'm going to make that move this week. So whilst it is blocking me from getting Gordon, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. Because I think it's only this week that I'd really regret going without him. So most people probably just say, just do Bradley to Porro instead of Bradley to Burn. But I think I want to do Burn. And it's not only because I just prefer the Newcastle fixtures and defence. It's also because in game week 36, as we'll see in a second, my defence is an absolute nightmare. And if I bring in Porro, he's got Liverpool in 36. So I don't really want to play Porro in 36 either. So I'm going to say, actually, bringing in 2 Newcastle defenders might be the plan, which seems bonkers. But it's a good fixture this week. So let me make the transfer. That'd be for a -4 hit. Let me then optimise the team. So, I wouldn't be playing a 4 at the back. Why has it done that? Obviously, Gusto would be on the bench. So, it would be this 3-5-2 here. And I'd have to rely on João Pedro hopefully starting. But then I'd have Van Heck on the bench if anyone did miss out altogether. So, going into game week 36, I'd have 2.7 in the bank. So, I've not used all of my money at all. And I've got lots of options here. If I just optimise the team, if Gusto's back, he comes straight back into the 11. And then I wouldn't play Van Heck, I don't think. I'd play Fabian Schär. So I'd have double Newcastle defence against Burnley away. I'd have Gusto. If Gusto's not available, I would play Van Heck against Villa at home. I then have 8 Nuri, who obviously I don't want to play because he's got City. The midfield 5 is okay on paper, and the front 2 is fine. And then I've got João Pedro off the bench. Again, if Haaland's not available or any of my other players miss out, I do have João Pedro. At this point, I would have a decision, though. Because Salah, let's say Salah doesn't play particularly well in Game Week 35. He's then got Tottenham this week. He's got Villa the week after. I would have the option now to do Salah to Bruno or Salah to De Bruyne against Wolves at home, which could be really, really nice. I'm going to say for now that I wouldn't make the transfer. Because honestly, he's even a captaincy shout this week, Salah. If he shows any glimpse of anything in Game Week 35, the plan would probably be to roll a transfer into Game Week 37. So if I optimize the team here, you can see I do have 3 single game week players, but I would have 2 free transfers. So I guess the idea here would be 8 Nuri out for a defender of some kind. Maybe at this point I do risk it on a Man City defender, or maybe I go for a Dalot. Might be an okay option for the final 3. I know Man United, it's Arsenal at home and Newcastle at home. They're not great fixtures, but it would be a double game week. Let's just say it's Dalot for the time being. Then I would have the option. Do I want to take out Salah? Maybe for someone like a De Bruyne. Could be a decent option at this point if I didn't do it the week before for the double. And then do I want to do Raya out for a -4 for any of the doubling keepers? I honestly might not. Let's say I just make the 2 free transfers. This is just a rough plan, by the way. My bench boost might look something like... Fantasy Football Hub really hate Fabian Schär and Dan Burn, and I don't know why. I guess their defensive data are not great. But if Gusto's still available, it looks something like that. If Gusto's still an issue at this point, then I'm taking at least a -4 hit. And I would have to then probably look at bringing in another defender. Who it would be? Maybe at this stage it is Pedro Porro if I have the funds for it, which I do comfortably. So maybe at this point it is Pedro Porro comes in, make that transfer. So for a -4 hit, my bench boost might look something like... I don't know, it'd be something like Raya, João Pedro, Van Heck, Dalot. Not great on paper, but it's fine. That would take 2 hits to get there across the next 3 game weeks. It's okay. I mean, really not perfect. I'm expecting red arrows. And then in game week 38, if I optimize the team here, again, not perfect, but I'd have 1 free transfer here. And it would probably be bringing in, I would imagine, Saka, potentially for Foden or De Bruyne, or maybe just sorting out that defense a little bit because the defense on paper doesn't look particularly ideal. I guess I could play Fabian Schär for a double Newcastle defence against Brentford. So that's the rough plan. I guess what I'm trying to show you here is I think 1 Newcastle defender makes a lot of sense. And the reason I want 2 is in 36, I would be forced to play either Van Heck or Porro against Liverpool, where I'd much rather have double Newcastle defence against Burnley. And then I can, obviously, if I want to bring in Porro in this week, I can. So I guess the plan is probably to have Porro, Burn and Schär at some point. So it's in which order do I prioritise them, I suppose. I'd love to know down below, if this was your team going into 35, what order would you make the transfers? For me, I think Udogie to Schär is a given, and then it's whether I do make the extra transfer for a hit, Bradley to either Burn or Porro, or do I just not make that move this week, play Van Heck against Bournemouth, and then maybe potentially make the hit a little bit later when I have some more information. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 35 deadline decisions video. Hopefully this has been helpful, and if it has, please do smash that like button. And if you've watched to this point and you're not yet subscribed, please do consider subscribing. Until next time, which will be the deadline stream tomorrow morning. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.